The three prayers on the Mount of Olives. The Lord goes 3 times to pray. The first time he takes men with him. He arranges them in order, 8 more distant, 3 nearer, so that they can share in his first prayer, as if it had not been part of his plan to go twice more alone. He knows about Peter's denial to come, but he does not seem to have reckoned with their falling asleep here and now. The plan was that the church should accompany him into his prayer of suffering, in a kind of procession, the people in the background, then the 72, the 8, the 3, and at the head the Lord, who advances to the place where the new covenant is to be established, where the wills of Father and Son are united in the Spirit. The incarnate Son advances to the place where, as eternal Son, he has already always been one with the Father. At the head of the earthly church, as her embodiment, he advances toward the heavenly Christ in the Father. Not only to the Father, but also to himself as God in heaven, he says, "If it be possible, let this chalice pass from me." Like a man who has made a big life decision in his youth, that with the years becomes extremely difficult to maintain, and now he once again talks with the self that made the decision at the time. The sleeping disciples and the people behind him represent the disappointments he has gathered in the meantime. As an experienced human being, he looks toward the coming destruction. At the moment he utters his "Your will, not mine," he receives a new intimation of the divine will. It streams into him in a new way, strengthens him, confirms him. Yes, he will do the Father's will and carry the cross. He has arrived at a point of clarity. He does not really need to go a second time to prayer. But now he finds his disciples asleep, and this sleep snaps within him his communion with them. They did not accompany him after all. He is left alone. And even when he exhorts them and enjoins on them to watch and to pray, explaining to them how weak the flesh is, the bond between him and them has changed, has loosened. And in going anew into solitude to pray, it is like a return to the Father. He is the naked, forsaken Son going to the Father, still more stripped through this disappointment, more divested of himself on earth and in heaven. He goes to the Father as such, who is the Father from the beginning, the Father of the old covenant. And in assuring this Father again that his will must be done, he means the age-old will, where it is no longer necessary for the Son to recognize its unity with his own will. The first time his earthly will had been brought into conformity with the heavenly will of Father and Son, now he encounters the Father's will in a way that makes it a matter of indifference whether his own will has ever been in agreement with it. He has become more lonely, more estranged, unfamiliar. The Son in his prayer knows no longer what this will looks like. In returning from prayer a second time, it is the Father's creatures he joins. He does not even address them. He seems to be shy of the Father. Perhaps he would influence the Father's creatures by speaking to them. Until now, they were his own creatures in his union with the Father. Now they are the Father's creatures who withdraw almost simultaneously with the Father's withdrawal. The motivation differs in each case, but the effect is the same. When the Son goes to prayer for the 3rd time, he stands before God the Spirit, who lives in unity with the Father, but at this moment is encountered in the foreground, while the Father remains in the background. The Son goes to the Spirit who had carried the Father's seed to earth in order to tell him that he will do his will and to offer him anew the whole course of his life. The Spirit carries the Father's seed himself, who is the Son, and the Son wants to recognize in him the Father's will and consent to his whole life's journey. The chalice is now not only the cross, it contains more. The whole existence of the Son from the moment of his incarnation. beginning with the mother's consent. Men have forsaken him. He had withdrawn from them in order to find the will of God alone, but now he meets in the Father and the Spirit, and in the Spirit he encounters them again embraced by his mother's consent. It is on behalf of a mankind that is inaccessible to him that he says yes to the Father and the Spirit. But this mankind appears almost sublimated in the mother's fiat. He cannot now find access to this mankind. He himself is naked and poor and almost weightless. He is the mission personified, as naked and as weightless as at the time when he was the Father's seed carried by the Spirit. There is a huge distance between the first and the third prayer. In the first, his will could be shown to him as something personal, his own, that could freely stand in contrast to the will of God. This has now disappeared because he has submitted everything to the Father and has left everything behind that had already left him. His whole attitude is that of one already crucified who remains standing or hanging where he had been placed. In this, his third fiat, he has integrated the church in himself. Before this, his church was visible in these disciples, these offices already established, this ordered company, in this whole plan of the Son to come before the Father on the Mount of Olives together with his own. Now this church is asleep. She appears to be laid aside as such for the present. She has failed also as institution through the weakness of her representatives, even in its 3 appointed witnesses, and no one knows what the others may be doing. The church is alive now only in the Lord himself. In him she is alert community, salvific institution. He bears her in himself in such a way that he himself almost becomes anonymous before God the Spirit. There is no more distinction between himself and the church. It would really belong to the church to stand before the Spirit in this third prayer in order to beg him to awaken his will in her. But she has failed to such a degree that the Son totally takes on her role. In his own nakedness he covers her. When he falls to the ground to speak to the Father, his body protects the church from the reproaches of the Spirit that are meant for her, but touch only him and her only through him. Between the first and third prayer, the second has its place, in which the Son is alone before the Father in such a way so as not to influence the Father. He is here at the origin of his fiat, so that this prayer becomes the source of the third. Amen.